He sprinkled the mixture onto the mermaid's skin, the aroma immediately filling the air. The smell was intoxicating, sweet and savory at the same time, with a hint of something Sabi couldn't quite place. It was unlike any fish he had ever cooked before. He felt a strange mix of excitement and fear as he prepared to place the mermaid over the fire. As he did, the world around him seemed to change. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees, and the river's surface began to ripple, as if something was stirring beneath it. The fire crackled louder, and the flames danced higher, casting strange shadows on the ground. Sabi ignored the eerie atmosphere, focusing on the task at hand. He turned the mermaid over the fire, the skin browning and crisping as it cooked. The smell grew stronger, more intense, filling his senses and making his mouth water. But as the mermaid cooked, Sabi began to feel uneasy. The air around him grew thick, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. He could have sworn he heard whispers, faint and distant, carried on the wind. But when he looked around, there was no one there. Shaking off the feeling, Sabi continued to cook, determined to see this through, but deep down, he knew that something was not right. The river, the trees, the very air itself seemed to be watching him, waiting for something to happen. The fire crackled softly as Sabi finished cooking the mermaid. The once shimmering scales were now a golden brown, and the smell was overwhelming, a blend of sweet and savory that made Sabi's stomach growl with hunger. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until that moment, the scent of the cooked mermaid igniting a deep primal urge to eat. He took a deep breath and reached for his knife, ready to cut the first piece. But as his hand hovered over the mermaid's body, he hesitated. A strange feeling washed over him, a mix of fear and anticipation. This wasn't just any fish. It was something much more, something beyond his understanding. For a moment, Sabi considered throwing the mermaid back into the river, letting the current carry her away. But the thought was fleeting. He had come too far to turn back now. With a resolve that surprised even himself, Sabi cut a piece from the mermaid's side and brought it to his mouth. The first bite was unlike anything he had ever tasted. The flesh was tender, almost melting in his mouth, with a flavor that was both sweet and savory, rich and complex. It was as if all the tastes of the river had come together in this one bite. Sabi chewed slowly, savoring every moment, his senses overwhelmed by the experience. But as he swallowed, a sharp pain shot through his stomach, causing him to double over in agony. He dropped the knife and clutched his belly, gasping for breath as the pain intensified. It felt like something was tearing him apart from the inside, a burning sensation that spread through his entire body. Sabi fell to his knees, the world around him spinning as the pain grew unbearable. He tried to cry out, but no sound came. The river, the trees, the fire, everything seemed to close in on him, the shadows growing darker, the whispers louder. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the pain stopped. Sabi collapsed on the ground, panting and drenched in sweat. He lay there for what felt like hours, too weak to move, his mind reeling from what had just happened. When he finally managed to sit up, he felt different. His body was heavy, his skin tingling with a strange sensation. He looked down at his hands and gasped. His skin was covered in small iridescent scales, shimmering in the dim light. His fingers felt stiff, his nails elongated and sharp. Panic set in as Sabi realized that he was changing, his body transforming into something inhuman. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled beneath him, fusing together into a single powerful tail. He screamed, a guttural sound that echoed through the forest, but there was no one to hear him. The river called to him, its voice clear and undeniable. It beckoned him to come, to join it in its depths, to become one with it. Sabi fought the urge, but it was too strong. He could feel the pull, the irresistible force that drew him closer to the water. With a final desperate cry, Sabi dragged himself to the riverbank. The water was dark and foreboding, but it welcomed him with open arms. He plunged into the river, the cool water enveloping him, soothing his aching body. As he sank beneath the surface, the last remnants of his humanity slipped away. His mind grew quiet, the pain fading into a distant memory. The river was his home now, his world, his everything. And somewhere deep in the water, the mermaid's voice whispered to him, welcoming him to the world of the river spirits. Sabi's transformation was complete. He had become one with the river, his body a strange mix of man and fish, his mind a blur of thoughts and instincts. He no longer felt the fear or pain that had consumed him before. Instead, he felt a sense of peace, a deep connection to the water that surrounded him. But as he swam through the depths of the river, exploring his new world, he was not alone. A figure appeared before him, her long hair flowing like a dark cloud around her head, her eyes glowing with an eerie light. Her face was cold and stern, her eyes filled with an ancient wisdom that made Sabi feel small and insignificant. "You have failed," the old woman said, her voice echoing through the water like a distant thunder. "You have disrespected the river and its creatures. Now you must pay the price." Sabi tried to speak, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but no words came. The old woman shook her head, her expression unreadable. "You are now bound to the river," she continued. "You will serve as its guardian, protecting it from those who would harm it, just as I have done for centuries. But know this, the river is unforgiving. It will demand everything from you, and it will show you no mercy." With that, the old woman faded into the darkness, leaving Sabi alone in the vast, endless river. He felt a sense of dread wash over him, the weight of his new role pressing down on him like a heavy stone. He was no longer Sabi the fisherman. He was something else now, something ancient and powerful, but also cursed and bound to the river for eternity. Life as a guardian of the river was not easy. Sabi spent his days and nights patrolling the waters, ensuring that no harm came to the river and its creatures. He had become one with the river, able to move through its depths with ease, his senses attuned to every ripple and current. But the river was demanding, always calling for more. Sabi was never at rest, never at peace. He was always on edge, always alert, always ready to defend the river from any threat. And there were threats. Fishermen who sought to take more than they needed, poachers who hunted the river's creatures, and even villagers who polluted the waters with their waste. Sabi dealt with them all, his new powers allowing him to protect the river with an iron fist. But the river was also a harsh mistress. It showed no mercy, even to its guardian. Sabi's body continued to change, his humanity slipping away bit by bit. He grew scales on his skin, his eyes turned a deep, dark green, and his voice became a low, guttural rumble. The villagers began to tell stories of a monster that lived in the river, a creature that punished those who disrespected the water. Some said it was the spirit of a fisherman who had been cursed for his greed. Others said it was the river itself, taking on a form to protect its secrets. But Sabi knew the truth. He was the monster, the cursed fisherman who had paid the ultimate price for his actions. He was no longer human, no longer a part of the world he once knew. And as the years passed, Sabi came to accept his fate. He was the guardian of the river, bound to it for eternity, a part of its endless, ever-changing flow. One day, many years after Sabi's transformation, a group of villagers came to the river. They were young and foolish, and they had heard the stories of the mermaid that lived in the water. They wanted to see her for themselves, to prove that the tales were just old legends, nothing more. But as they approached the water, Sabi felt a familiar presence. The old woman appeared before him once again, her face stern and unforgiving. "These children are ignorant," she said. "They do not know the dangers they face, but you do." Sabi nodded, understanding what he had to do. He would protect the river just as he always had, just as the old woman had taught him. But as he moved to scare the children away, the old woman stopped him. "Wait," she said, her voice softening. "There is something you need to know." Sabi looked at her, confused. The old woman sighed and waved her hand, and the water around them shimmered and changed. Images appeared, like memories from a distant past. Sabi saw himself as a young man, fishing by the river, just as he had done for so many years. But this time, he was not alone. A woman stood beside him, her face hidden in the shadows. "You were not always a fisherman," the old woman said. "You were once a guardian of the river just like me, but you grew tired of your duties, tired of the endless cycle of life and death. So you asked to be freed, to live a simple life as a human. The river granted your wish, but with one condition, that you would return to your duties if you ever disrespected the river again. The images faded, and Sabi felt a deep sadness in his heart. He had forgotten who he was, forgotten his true purpose, but now he understood. The old woman smiled sadly. "You have fulfilled your duty, Sabi. You have protected the river just as you were meant to. But the river is merciful. It is time for you to rest." With those words, Sabi felt a warmth spread through his body. The scales on his skin began to fade. His eyes returned to their normal color, and his tail split into legs once more. He was human again, free from the curse that had bound him for so long. But Sabi knew that he could never return to his old life. He had changed too much, seen too much. Instead, he decided to stay by the river, living a simple life as a fisherman, just as he had always wanted. And as the years passed, the stories of the river monster faded into legend. The villagers forgot about the curse, the mermaid, and the old woman. But Sabi never forgot. He continued to fish by the river, always respectful, always careful, knowing that the river was always watching. And sometimes, late at night, when the moon was high and the water was still, Sabi would hear a voice whispering to him from the depths of the river. It was the old woman, reminding him of his past, his duty, and the choices he had made. But Sabi was at peace. He had found his place in the world, a place by the river where he could live out his days in quiet contentment, knowing that he had done what was right.